everyone. Thank you for attending the Building a Functional Resume webinar. My name is Mary Catherine Arnold, and I'm one of the Career Services Advisors here at South University. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that you are currently in listen-only mode. So this means that if you do have any questions throughout the presentations, on the right-hand side of your screen, see a box to type them in. Please feel free to type them into that area, and then at the conclusion of the webinar, I will be answering any questions that you may have. So today, we'll be covering a lot about really the basics of a functional resume. We'll look at the A to Z on how to write one, what type of information should you include on it, and really how does it differ. So we'll take a look and just start off with the basic definition of it. We'll look at how it differs from a reverse chronological resume, which is probably the resume that you're most common with seeing. We'll look at when do you specifically use a functional resume. Is this the right type of resume for you? We'll look at how to set it up, what are the different sections, how should it flow, and then we'll also look at a sample of a functional resume, go over some of the benefits of using one, and then we'll open it up to those questions like I said earlier. So let's jump into what exactly is a functional resume. Well, a functional resume is a resume that focuses on and highlights your skills and experience rather than your chronological work history. So this means that it will have a different format than the standard reverse chronological resume. And it gives you the opportunity to really focus on your achievements and accomplishments throughout your entire career rather than just focusing on what you did in the position that you were in. And this really, again, when we're looking at this, there are some similarities to the reverse chronological resume as we want to focus and highlight on what makes you the ideal candidate for a position, and really we want to build that value, but we just do it in a different way. So really, what are the differences? How do they differ from each other? So your reverse chronological resume, as I mentioned earlier, this is what focuses on your work experience. Typically, you have your introduction, whether it's an objective or a professional summary or a background summary, goes into your education, and then it provides you with your current place of employment, the bulleted list of what you do at your current place of employment, and then all of your past employment. But the functional resume, it differs because this is where we're focusing on just your skills from all of your positions in together. So how do we do that? How do we really make that happen for you? Well, when we're looking at the reverse chronological resume, this is something that lists it in order, lists all of your employment in order, and really gives an explanation for each position. But in the functional resume, your work experience isn't focused on as much as those skills. So your work experience is going to be at the bottom, and really what you're going to do is you're going to show your skills section, you're going to break them into some major categories of different types of skills that you have, and supply some bulleted statements about why you're so great at those skills. And those are really going to be the body of your functional resume. Now, again, the reverse chronological resume, it shows that progression of your career, where the functional resume really shows the progression of your skills. So you get to choose which skills are the most important for the job that you're applying to, which skills are the least, and order your resume in that order, rather than showing, hey, this is the job I'm doing now, this is the job I did 2 years ago, and so on and so forth. Now, the reverse chronological resume is typically used for someone who's an expert in one field. So if you've been in the same field for a while, you're probably going to use a reverse chronological resume. But you're going to use a functional resume if you've been in a lot of different fields, and really to show that you're an expert in a lot of different areas and a lot of different skills. So when we're looking at it, really the question comes down to, well, now I know a little bit of the difference, but when do I know that it's okay for me to use a functional resume? Should I be using one now? So there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different reasons for when you should use a functional resume. One of the most common times to use a functional resume is if you've had a lot of different positions within a year or within a really short time frame. And this is probably what a hiring manager would refer to someone as a job hopper or job jumper. So since many organizations value that loyalty to a company, and they want to see that you've had a lot of years with one organization, this might be the right time for you to use a functional resume because you want them to see, look, I have all the skills you're looking for, just maybe not the time that you're looking for me to be at one place. Now, it's also common to use a functional resume when you're re-entering the workforce after a large time span of not being employed. Now, this can happen for a couple different reasons. A lot of times, a lot of our students are stay-at-home parents, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or dad. Maybe you're taking care of a sick relative, or you're helping a relative, or yourself, you're recovering from a medical condition. So this is a great time, if you're looking and you've been out of the workforce for a year or two, this might be a great time to use a functional resume. It also, and the reason for this is that, and you'll see this in the sample resume that we'll go over, but all of your dates of employment really become hidden at the bottom of your resume. So the hiring manager and the recruiter, they're going to read more about those accomplishments and those skills before they get the opportunity to focus on, well, why did they work there? When did they work there, and a little bit more about why is there that gap in their employment. So they're going to have a bigger impact by looking at those skills first. And this is going to really help them to build that value of why you are the ideal candidate. What can you provide to the organization for working for them? Now, functional resumes are also great to use if you have those large gaps in your employment. So again, this can be something where maybe you had a job for 5 years and then you were unemployed for 2 years. It was difficult for you to find something new that fit you a little bit better. It's a great time to use it. It's going to hide those gaps of employment at the bottom. So again, the hiring manager, the recruiter, they're going to read through all those skills and be impressed by you before they get to see those gaps in employment. And another great time to use a functional resume is if you're transitioning into a new career. And this can be really important for you because a lot of times a hiring manager and a recruiter, they want to see that you're the right person for the position based off of your skills, based off of being in the field for X number of years. So if you have all those skills because you've done things like your management, you've done things like customer service, and you've had a lot of time to perfect those types of skills, but it would just be in a different type of environment, it's a great way to highlight to the hiring manager and the recruiter that I'm qualified for this position and I'm going to impress you when you bring me on. So how do we set up a functional resume? I know you guys have heard me talk that it's a little bit different from any of the resumes that you've seen before. It's a little bit different than your reverse chronological resume. So what are the different sections? What's the order of it? Because that's something that's going to be really important when you're looking at building a functional resume. So the first section that you'll see, and this is the same from no matter which type of resume you do, whether you use a combination resume, whether you use a reverse chronological resume, whether you use a functional resume, this is going to be the same. And this is a header. Now your header should include your name, your address, a phone number, and an email address. Now with the email address, you want to make sure that your email address is professional. So typically the best way to build one would be using your first name, last name at like yahoo.com or at gmail.com, whatever email that you use. You should and that means that you should avoid using anything like I'm too cool for school at yahoo.com. So this is going to be really important because this makes a big impact. As a hiring manager, if I'm looking at your resume and I see that you don't have a professional email, that to me tells me that you're probably not taking serious, you're probably not taking your job search serious, and you might not be a serious enough candidate for the position. So always be sure that you're checking that. The second section that you're going to see is your summary. This is going to be essentially an introduction to who you are as a candidate, what types of fields that you've been in, what types of skills and expertise you have to offer. So just as you would when you're writing a paper, it's kind of like your introduction paragraph. It's going to be the brief overview of you as a professional in the workforce. So this states the skills that you possess, the areas that you've worked in, and how you will benefit the organization by being hired. Now, it's important when you're writing this section, you want to avoid any pronouns such as I, me, my, our, etc. And the reason for this is that this is your resume. When I'm the hiring manager and I'm the recruiter, I know that everything that's on your resume is about you. So I don't need you to explain, oh, well, this is what we did, this is what I did, because it's already assumed. Now, also when you're doing this and when you're looking at a professional summary, a background summary, or a summary of qualifications, you want to be sure to include fragmented statements. And you should try to keep your summary anywhere from 3 to 6 statements long. Now with these statements, typically they're just going to be a little bit shorter than a sentence. And again, because they're going to be probably fragments because you're not going to be including those pronouns. Now if you do a summary of qualifications, this is a little bit different than the professional summary or the background summary that you can use for this. If you do a summary of qualifications, it's just going to be a couple of bulleted statements that list those accomplishments and those main skills and achievements. Personally, I prefer doing some type of summary. I think it makes a little bit more of an impact to the hiring manager because it reads just as a story would read about me as a candidate. It makes it easy for the hiring manager to understand about your skills as well as your career progression. So you might be asking now, well, how do I tell the difference whether I'm going through a professional summary or choosing a background summary? The difference is the number of years that you've been working or that you've been in the specific field. Now, if you've been in the workforce for 5 or more years, that's when you utilize a professional summary. If it is less than 5 years, that's when you want to use a background summary. Essentially, the content in it is the exact same. If you are, and one of the tricks to a great resume is if you're applying to a position that requires a bachelor's degree, you only have an associate's degree, but your plan is to immediately go on into a bachelor's degree, that's something that you can include in your paragraph or in your background summary. You can simply state all of your accomplishments, all your skills, and the overview of you as a professional, and state that you have plans to go and obtain that bachelor's degree. Now, after the summary, the next main section is going to be your professional experience section. Now, with this section, this is where your resume really starts to differ from a reverse chronological resume. Now, with your professional experiences, this is where you're going to choose 3 to 4 main categories that you are an expert in. And these are categories which I would consider to be those subsections of this section of your resume. They will have a bulleted list of your achievements underneath them. Now, these sections should be different sections that are all important to the desired position. So some positions that you're applying for might view management as something that's more important, where others might view customer service more important. So you're going to rank these subsections based off of what the importance is from the desired position and what is the position really looking for in its main candidate. So with these sections, these subsections are going to be those overarching transferable skills that you have to offer. So for instance, if you're a business major, it would benefit you to split them up into different subsections such as management, finance, marketing, sales, and customer service. Because these allow me to see, wow, you're an expert in all of these different things. Now, with this professional experience section, you also want to be sure that you're including that your bulleted points underneath them are just similar bullet points to what you would do in a reverse chronological resume. So what do I mean by that? So these bullet points are going to start off by listing an action word, so your verb. It's all going to be in past tense, and you're going to list your accomplishment that you completed within that overarching skill. And we'll show you a little bit more in this sample resume that I've included for you. So that way, if you have any concerns or if you're confused, we'll definitely get to that. The next major section that you'll see is the list of your employment history. Now this again differs from the reverse chronological resume. In this section, you're simply going to list the start date, which is your month and year, to the end date, which is again a month and a year, followed by the company that you worked for, the city and the state that the company was in, and then the job title. And you're going to do this in reverse chronological order and list them from your most recent position all the way down to the last one within the last 5 to 10 years. Now, it differs from the reverse chronological resume because in a reverse chronological resume, you would put all those bullet points underneath about what you did in that position. But now, because we're doing a functional resume, you've already listed what you've done in those positions up in the professional experience section. So you don't have to include anything else but the dates, the company, and the job title. Finally, and this may differ from depending on how much experience you have in the different fields, you want to include your education. Your education is going to be listed very similar to your work experience. It's going to have, you are going to list only your college education. So this means any college that you've gone to that you've earned the degree you want to add. So include the full title of the degree. So for example, if you are in the bachelor's program for the health science, you want to put your title down, your degree title down as Bachelor of Science in Health Sciences. Then you want to also include the date that you earned or the anticipated date of the completion of the program. So for instance, say I am planning on graduating in December of 2015. Well, right now we're currently in October of 2015. So I'm going to put that my anticipated graduation date is December 2015. And then you also, in this section, want to include just the school that you're going to and the city and the state of the school. So now, I mentioned a little bit before we jumped into all the specifics of the education that this might differ on where you place it. And you may find that your education, depending on how much experience you have in the workforce, might be suited best up underneath the summary before you jump into the professional experience section. And this can be important for you, especially depending on how long maybe you've been out of the workforce for the past 5 years, but in the past 2 years, you've been doing something with your professional career. You've been focusing on your education. And I want to show the hiring manager that. So that's a great opportunity and a great example of when you should bring your education up to the summary, up to right after the summary. Now, before we see the sample resume, I wanted to just cover some additional tips. And these are things that help you really create a solid and strong resume. The first thing that you want to remember is that you want to leave a good amount of space on the sides. So your margins should be no smaller than a ½ inch to no larger than an inch. And you want to leave enough white space in general on the page, and especially along the margins, because you'll see hiring managers, when they're interviewing you, or even once they've reviewed your resume, they will make notes on your resume. It helps them to remember, hey, this is what Susie did. I now know what Susie talked about, or what questions I want to ask Susie, because I think that this accomplishment is great, but I want to understand more of the context. So want to always leave enough margins on the side. You also want it to be an easily readable font. I can't tell you the number of times I see resumes that have all this cursive writing. It makes it too hard for me to read. As a hiring manager, I'm spending 30 seconds or less reviewing your resume. So that means that your resume I need to be able to read through it very fast. If I have to struggle reading the words that you have on the page, your resume might go into the garbage just because I don't have time for that. You also want to remember to keep your resume to one page, and this is very important. No matter how many years of experience you have in the field, a strong, solid resume is one page because it provides you an overview with your skills, your experience, and the ways that you will impact that organization by being selected as that candidate, as the new employee. So again, since I have 30 seconds or less to review it, I need to be able to read as many resumes as I can within my short amount of time. I need to get a clear picture for who you are as a candidate without having to worry about, is this the same, is this second page, does this belong to Susie? Does this belong to Dave? I can't really tell unless it's all on one page. Again, just as I mentioned earlier, the professional email. This is key. Remember that. Also, when you're talking about your resume, a strong resume includes a lot of specific details. If you told me that you implemented a new contact strategy, I want to know, what were the results like? Why was this important? Why did you feel like you had to do this? You need to be able to paint me the picture so that way I clearly can understand, wow, I really want to bring Susie onto the team. Now, you'll also see that, again, I included provide white space. White space is very important. Not only does it allow me as a hiring manager to write my notes about you as a candidate, but it also allows me to clearly break up your resume into different sections. I can clearly see the pathway that you want me to read, what you feel like is most important to least important. I can clearly see where sections break up. You know, if I'm only interested in knowing what your professional career has been so far, then I want to be able to easily find that on your resume to read that first. You also want to be sure to include more numbers. And this kind of goes along and hand in hand with specifics. So when you're talking about your bulleted statements, you want to show me things like the percentage that new process or that new contact strategy, what type of impact did it have on the organization? Did it increase your productivity? Did it increase your results? And if so, by how much? Also, this is great if you're like in the healthcare field and you want to show the type of workload that you have on a daily basis with working with students. It's a great way to, with working with patients. It's a great way for me to see how many patients do you deal with? How many patients do you handle on a day-to-day basis? What is your day really like? Are you going to be able to handle the environment that we have here? Or is this going to be something that might be a struggle for you? And then one of the biggest things that you want to be sure to do is proofread. Use the spell check that's in Microsoft Word. Have someone else look over it. The worst thing that can happen is to have incorrect spellings on there, and to have really poor grammar and poorly structured statements on your resume. You want it to be as clear as possible to the hiring manager. I'll be honest, when I see resumes that have a lot of spelling errors, I throw them right out, because that to me tells me that this candidate might not be taking this job search seriously. And then the last major tip is that you want to be consistent throughout the entire resume. And consistency is really important because it shows me as a hiring manager that you're very attentive to detail, that you're very organized. And these are all great qualities that I want to see in a candidate. You can tell me all you want on that resume that you are detail-oriented and that you are well-organized, but when I'm reading that, if I don't get that sense from you, that to me just tells me you're just putting words on the paper, and I don't want to see that when I'm hiring. So we've gone over a lot of tips. So I know this is probably the moment that you guys are all waiting for. Let's dive into looking at what does a functional resume actually look like. So as you can see, we're taking a look at Jane Doe. Jane Doe, she has a great header and heading section on her resume. Clearly states her address, her phone number, and then a professional email address. She also leads with a professional summary, which is dedicated, hardworking professional with over 6 years of experience providing quality customer service in various sales positions. Proven ability to collaborate with teams and build rapport with clients from a diverse population, developed strong analytical skills, team management, resource management, time management, and conflict resolution skills. Proficient in Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. So here, when I'm looking at Jane Doe, I had a lot to process, but it wasn't too much. So I got to see, well, great, she's great in the customer service role. She has sales experience. This is great. If I'm looking for her, if I'm looking to fill someone in that type of position, well, 6 years, that's pretty impressive. She told me that she can work with different clients, build those reports, which means from a sales perspective, she's going to be able to close those sales, which is what I want. I want someone who's going to produce for me. I want someone who's going to be very driven. And then she also tells me, she's got a lot of skills to offer me that maybe a lot of my candidates don't. It's just an overview, so she doesn't go too much in detail, but I get to see what types of skills that she has, what types of background that she has. And then I also can see, great, well, she's proficient in Microsoft Office. That's perfect. We use a lot here of that in our office. Now you'll see the next section is the education section. So for Jane, let's see, why did she do this? So as we talked about earlier, I know the original slide said that your education should be at the bottom. But if we go down and look and glance at her employment history, it appears that she's been unemployed since December of 2008. But you know what's great? She's been working on her bachelor's degree since then. So me as a hiring manager, I can probably guess and bet that this is what she's been doing to occupy her time. So to me, it shows me that even though she might not have been employed at this point in time, she's still working towards a professional and a career-related goal. So that's why her education is up top. Now we jump into the professional experience section. And this is where it really varies from the reverse chronological experience. As you can see, the subsections are management, customer service, and marketing. So these subsections, it differs from your reverse chronological resume because you're not seeing those job titles there that you would typically see. You're not seeing the job information. You're just seeing these overall skills and expertise that Jane has to offer me. So let's take a look at some of the bullet points underneath the management. So when we're looking at this, we see that she says that she oversaw all operations and daily functioning, including maintenance, inventory, and staff scheduling. She participated in staff recruitment initiatives and managed all employee hiring. She increased office productivity by 5% through monitoring all orders and shipments, and she's recognized as the most valued manager. Well, that's great. You know, why would I not want to bring Jane on? I see that she has a strong management experience. You know, she can handle a lot of different things as a manager. She even increased her office productivity, which is fantastic. So it shows me that she's detail-oriented. It shows me that she's results-oriented, and that's what I want in a manager. One thing that Jane could have actually done different here, though, is also added how many employees does she oversee. So it's great to know that she has this management experience, but if we really want to be impressed, we want to see that she's aware of how big her teams are that she manages. Similarly, if we jump down into the customer service section, she said that she orchestrated special events and reservations to ensure customer appreciation and increasing customer base by 2% annually. Well, that's great. Again, I see that she can produce results. It shows me that she was able to really watch her customers, make sure that they knew that they were appreciated, and do everything in her ability to service her customers with the best quality of service possible. And it shows because, again, we have the result. She increased her customer base by 2%, and that's incredible. One thing she could have done differently with this statement, again, is add a little bit more of a number. Give me a little bit more of an idea. How many customers do you typically handle on a day-to-day basis? What are you used to? And also, you know, when we see that she conducted customer satisfaction surveys to review company strategies and their strengths and weaknesses. Well, that's important. That to me says, well, she's always looking to improve. As a hiring manager, I want someone who's going to take that initiative and go the next step. And then we also see that she provided 24/7 support to all users to consistently provide quality customer satisfaction. Again, that's important. I want to know that she's going to be there for my customers. I want to know that what she's going to offer is really going to help my customers move forward. And then she does a very similar thing with the marketing. And I'm not going to go over that just because we've gone over a lot of detail earlier with the resume. But if we also jump down to the employment history section, you'll see that this differs from the reverse chronological resume. Again, you'll see that each employment, each company, each information about each organization, it's all in one line. We're trying to hide this as much as possible, condense it down to the bottom of the page. So the employment history, we see that she was employed from March 2007 to December 2008. That's not too bad of a run. It's a little bit over a year. So that's pretty impressive. And we see that what company she was at. She was at ABC Company in Savannah, Georgia, as a manager. Well, let's take a look at her next one. Well, if she wasn't employed from 2007, it was from 2002 to 2007 that she was unemployed. So this is why she's using a functional resume. She's using it because, first off, she hasn't had a job since 2008, and secondly, because between 2007 and 2002, she was unemployed. So we don't want employers to automatically think that we're unemployable, and we don't want employers to think that I'm not qualified for this position, because I really am. So Jane, you can see, you know, she was, again, only there for about a year. So it kind of can also come across that maybe she's a job jumper. Maybe she just gets tired after a year of being in a position or being with an organization. And same with the September 2000 to December 2000. Well, she wasn't there very long at all. So we want to make sure that we're able to hide that, condense it to the bottom, not necessarily lie to the employer, because you never want to do that on a resume, but it still shows that, look, I have everything you're looking for. I'm a great candidate. Please call me for an interview. So we looked at the sample of the functional resume. So what are the benefits of a functional resume? The first thing to keep in mind is that it is extremely organized. It gives the hiring manager a clear path on the areas that you have excelled in within your field and within your background. It also allows you to categorize your strengths and compare and contrast your past positions and your success within those positions. So if we go back and we look at Jane Doe's resume, you know, maybe if she was applying for just a customer service position and she didn't really need any of that management, well, maybe she could put management down at the bottom because she really needed to highlight that customer service. So there's a variety of different ways that you can make that clearly organized and still show, hey, this is the most important skill. I know that this is the type of stuff you're looking for in this candidate, but here's all the other things I have to offer as well. Another great benefit to a functional resume is that it can be in all past tense. And this is something that's really useful because maybe in your current organization, if you are currently employed, maybe you've actually had you've completed a project, but the project only lasted for a couple of months, but you've been in that position for much longer. Well, I want to naturally write that project in past tense because that project was in past tense, but how do I clearly show that? So that's what's nice about a functional resume as well, because it allows you to just put everything in past tense. You don't necessarily have to be concerned with, is this my current position? Is it supposed to still be in present tense or not? Now, one of the other things is that it de-emphasizes the importance of your employment. Again, this is something that I've stressed a lot throughout the functional resume. So this may be, one of the reasons why you might want to use it. So definitely, if any of those situations apply to you, then you might want to look a little bit more into this and start creating one. And then it also highlights the skills both inside and outside of a specific field. And this is really important because you'll have a couple different people also use a functional resume. So a little bit more than just if you've been unemployed recently or if you have large gaps in your employment. But a lot of people also use this if they're in one specific field. So for instance, maybe I'm a nurse and I've worked in every unit from the ER to the ICU to any other critical care to the NICU. I've worked in a variety of different units that I want to make sure that they can see I'm diverse. I have skills across the whole entire spectrum, and that can be another time to really use that. And again, it also is nice because it really allows you, if you have been someone in the same field, to really be able to go over all the skills that you have, especially if your skills encompass more than the 10-year time frame that your resume should typically focus on. So before we get into the questions, I've talked a lot about a functional resume, how to use it, when to use it, but I just want to recap everything to hopefully cover up and tie up any loose ends for you. So a functional resume is definitely very different, and it's special. So again, a great thing about a functional resume is that it provides an overview of your general skills. It's also important to remember that it is set up differently from a reverse chronological resume, as it focuses on those achievements and less on when you accomplish those achievements. So that's always something to keep in mind, is that if it's something that you really need to highlight those accomplishments and those achievements more so than where you worked, that's a great time to use it. And it's also great because maybe you work for a company that has a bad rep or a bad reputation. And if that's the case, then that's a great way to hide, hey, look, I actually work for so-and-so. I actually work for this company. It does help to mask the employment, so whether it's because you don't want them to really focus on who you work for, or whether it's because you don't want them to see that, hey, this is, I'm unemployed right now, or I have large gaps of employment, it's really a great time to use a functional resume. And then also because it organizes your strengths and expertise. So and this is probably the most important thing, a lot of us want to highlight all of our strengths. We want to brag about ourselves on our resume, and that's what a resume is there to do for you. So it's always important to kind of keep that in mind when building a functional resume. So I'd now like to open it up to any questions. What if you have helped out a friend with his or her business, like doing a favor for them? Can you list that on your resume since you have developed the skills and gained some experience? So with this question, it's a great question. So it's something that you can probably add on a functional resume. Now the question becomes, when you actually go into an interview, they might ask you for some more information about when you did that and why you did that. And that's when you really just need to be prepared when you go into that interview to explain that. Should I remove the dates that I worked altogether, since the employment is not supposed to be emphasized with a functional resume? I would recommend not to do this. And one of the reasons why is that a lot of hiring managers or recruiters, when they're looking at a resume, that's one of the most important factors to considering if this candidate should be called in for an interview. It tells me that this person, it tells me that you're not trying to hide anything. It tells me that you want to be upfront and honest. Again, the great point with a functional resume is that since all of your employment is down at the bottom of the resume, it's easier to hide it and to mask it, and for them to really focus more on those skills and achievements. Can I include certain bullet points under the categories without listing the place of employment under the employment history? So this kind of goes along with the first question. So although, again, I don't recommend it, even though employers only take 30 seconds to review your resume, they will surprise you with questions about those bullet points in your resume. So you want to make sure that you never get caught blindsided in the interview, because you want to be able to defend everything that's on there and be able to come up with a clear and concise answer as to why you did that, when you did that, and how you did that. I've held 10 jobs in the past 5 years. Should I list all of them on my functional resume? So I would say try to limit your jobs that you list either to the most important ones or the most recent ones. So when I'm talking about important ones, I'm meaning like the ones that are most relevant to the position that you're applying to. Again, one of the key things to having a really successful and a strong resume is that your resume should be geared to the specific position that you're interested in. You want to show the hiring manager why you are the ideal candidate for that position. Do you have to change your summary for every job that you are applying for? So this really depends on what the field is and if the jobs that you are applying for are similar. So again, remember that since your resume is supposed to talk about you and your qualifications for the desired position, it is really important that you demonstrate that you are the ideal candidate for the desired position. So this may be something where you really have to look at it from a case-to-case basis, especially because one of the other great tips that I can give you for having a successful resume and getting on to the next step of an interview is that a lot of times your resume will go through a scanning system to see if you are qualified based off of the keywords and the key phrases that coincide with the job description and what you have on your resume. So with this in mind, it may really benefit you to spend some time on your professional summary, look at the job description, look at your summary, and see if there are any keywords and key phrases that you're missing to put onto your resume as well. What if you have listed some references on your resume, but the personnel doesn't work at the company anymore? Who do you list? Who should be able to give you a good review about you? So with this in mind, you should never really be including references on your resume. Most times the application process is either going to have a section for you to list your references on, or you want to have them on a separate sheet of paper. Because what's going to happen is when you go in that interview, it's already assumed that when you go into an interview that you're able to provide them with those references. If that person no longer works at the company, that's perfectly okay to still include them in your references though, because they can still talk about you as a candidate and as how you were within that specific company. So with that, first you always want to make sure that all your references are aware that you're using them as a reference. So make sure that you're reaching out to them, make sure that they're aware of the types of jobs that you're going to be applying for, why you're interested in them. Because the worst thing that can happen as a reference, and this has happened to me a couple of times when I've been a reference for past colleagues and even past peers, is getting a call and them saying, oh, well, we were calling you in reference to a referral for so-and-so. So you, again, always make sure that they know and have a separate sheet for your references. How should a gap in employment from a disability be listed in your employment history? Again, one of the great things about a functional resume is that your employment history is hidden near the bottom so that employers won't focus on it. If you have a gap in your history or in your employment history, you do not need to make any mention of this on your resume. Simply putting the dates of when you started a position and when you ended a position is perfectly fine. A resume should simply list your skills, achievements, and accomplishments that show that you are the ideal candidate. So since the goal is to impress the hiring manager with your experience and with your background, whether you have a gap in your employment or not shouldn't really affect the fact that you know how to do these skills and that you have this background. How do you list jobs on your resume without employers thinking that you are too overqualified for the job? And that's always a tricky question. And one of the things that I would challenge you as a student and as a job searcher is to always, challenge yourself with applying to jobs that you think that might sometimes be out of your reach. Now, don't apply to every job that you feel like might be out of your reach. But if you feel like there's one that's a good fit, then definitely that's okay. If you're afraid that employers are going to think that you are overqualified for the position, you can play down some of your bullet points. You can talk a little bit less about certain things, but again, you're there to brag about yourself on your resume, so you want them to see all of your skills and everything that you have to offer. Very rarely is it the case that someone won't hire you for whether you're overqualified unless they feel like they're afraid that they might not be able to pay you what you're looking for. Do you consider volunteer work as work experience, or should volunteer work have a separate section on your resume? So this is something that really will depend on a case-by-case basis. So the first thing that is important to including volunteer experience on your resume is that you only want to include it if it's one of two things. The first one is if it's relevant to the desired position, and the second is if it would help to hide some of your employment gaps. So say, for instance, maybe I was unemployed for 2 years, but during that 2 years, I actually volunteered, and that's a great time to put it on there. Now, if you're putting it on there to help hide some of those employment gaps, what I would recommend is I would actually recommend you to include your volunteer experience in your employment history section. So with this, you would simply put the start date, the end date, the organization that you volunteered for, and then you would list the job title as volunteer, or if you had a specific title as the volunteer, put that in that title. Now with that, you can also include your bullet points if you have anything that was special and really helps to build those skills and build value to you as a candidate. You can put those underneath those main subsections that are up in that professional experience section to help show, look, I'm qualified for this position. Now, the other way that you can add volunteer experience on your resume is by including a complete separate volunteer experience section underneath the employment experience. So with this, now this I would only recommend for you to do if you have more than two or more volunteer experiences. If you do this, again, I would still put the bulleted statements up top underneath any of those subsections if you have something that helps to add value to it. And it looks like I have one more question, which is if you have worked more than 5 years and are doing the professional summary, what is the difference between that section and your professional experience section? So this is where, again, it kind of differs from your reverse chronological resume because the question, when you're looking at your reverse chronological resume, the point of the summary is there to simply just whet the appetite of the hiring manager or the recruiter. You're pretty much just trying to help the recruiter see that they want to continue reading, that they want to read on more about who you are. The professional summary, it's just there to provide a summary and an overview of you as a candidate, as you as a professional. The professional experience section, on the other hand, is there to show the specifics of what you did at your various positions. This is where you build the value for yourself as the candidate, and these are the bulleted statements that show that you are performance-oriented and that you have accomplished everything that this desired job wants you to have done. So again, this is the portion where you really get to brag who you are, and that's where it differs from the professional summary section. Is it good to list all the software that you have worked with on your resume, or is it a waste of time? Do employers look out for that? So it really depends on what the software is and what the job description is asking for. So this is where I would actually spend time and where your resume might differ from job to job that you apply for. So if the software that you've used that they're looking for is relevant to the job, then you want to include it, especially if it's listed in the job description. If it's not really relevant to the job, then you might not need to include it, and you probably would not want to. So, if you're talking about an IT resume, that's going to be a little bit different because you're going to have a little bit more software and a little bit more a little bit more of a difference with the types of programs and the type of skill set that you have. So that's something to always look out for. As far as, employers, it helps your chance. If you've worked with a certain software, it helps your chance to gain an opportunity to interview for that position. So it looks like that's all the questions today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I did want to let you know I have recorded this session, so it will be made available to you if you have any other questions or concerns, or you wanted to look back at it for future reference as well. Please feel free to join any of our other webinars that we have going on this week, as well as feel free to check out our YouTube page on all of the past and previous webinars that we have done. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will be sure to answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining.